Well, for more now, we can bring in Simon Mabon, Professor of International Politics rather, and Middle East Studies at Lancaster University. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So we saw earlier Saturday that Israel is targeting these bridges in the east to stop Hezbollah troops from advancing as it expands these operations amid these obvious fears of an occupation of southern Lebanon. So while the military's official mission is to disarm Hezbollah, its operational goal appears to be creating or more or less this extensive buffer zone along its borders. So can you talk us through what kind of strategy we're really seeing here?
Yeah, I think you've put it quite nicely there, and that there seems to be these conflicting strategies. There's the official strategy of trying to disarm Hezbollah, something that it's been trying to do for a good number of years now, something that it's tried to co-opt the Lebanese government into doing as well via the United States, of course. But the Lebanese government has itself failed to disarm Hezbollah for a number of different reasons. So in light of that, and given the practical logistical challenges of disarming a group that is so firmly embedded within the fabric of certain parts of Lebanese geography, it seems that there is a different shifting tactic, which is more along the lines of creating this buffer zone, a space that demarcates Lebanon from Israel itself. And we've seen a number of Israeli figures talking about this idea of a buffer zone, the idea that Israel's northern border should be the Litani River, for example. And that raises all manner of logistical problems, all manner of international law problems. And of course, it comes with a devastating human toll, with large numbers of villages being razed, large numbers of villages being destroyed. And it contributes to the massive displacement that Lebanese people are facing these days.
We're talking about the current offensive, but Israel has recorded more than 10,000 airspace violations during the ceasefire period. Was the November 2024 agreement ever anything more than a pause?
Well, I think it depends on how you see the ceasefire agreement. It certainly wasn't a mechanism to try and enact peace. It was ostensibly a ceasefire to bring about an end to that particular round of conflict. But as you've said, 10,000 strikes in a time of so-called peace does not suggest that the ceasefire was in any way actually enacted, if indeed it was a ceasefire. And I think that's why there's so much anger amongst many in the south of Lebanon, not just at Israel, but also at their government in Beirut, who failed to adequately protect Lebanese sovereignty, failed to adequately protect the people who have been targeted in these strikes across the south of Lebanon. And it really does raise a worrying specter about the nature of war and peace these days, that the two are collapsing into one, with an apparent ceasefire still allowing hundreds of people to be killed, and billions of dollars worth of destruction to property, to land, and to people's lives.
And Israel is now talking about a long-term security zone covering nearly a tenth of Lebanese territory. At what point does deterrence become occupation in practice?
Well, I think the Israelis are being very, very cautious not to use the term occupation because of what happened between the 1982 invasion and the withdrawal from southern Lebanon in the early 2000s. And that was a time, of course, that helped create Hezbollah. Israeli forces have themselves, Israeli figures have themselves said, without the Israeli presence in Lebanon, Hezbollah would not be there. And so they're very, very cautious, I think, not to talk about it in terms of an occupation, which brings with it all manner of logistical challenges and indeed legal issues that would require consideration, and certainly charges of ethnic cleansing, displacement, etc. So I think what it's trying to do is create this buffer zone, as you say. But in doing that, what it's doing is it's leaning into some of the more right-wing, ideologically driven agendas of the likes of Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, who have been calling for a broader expansion of Israel's territorial borders. That, of course, comes at a devastating physical price to Lebanon's urban landscape, and a devastating price for the Lebanese people themselves, not just those who have been killed and displaced from their homes, but the turmoil that is then being generated amongst the wider Lebanese society as a consequence of the ongoing strikes, for which many are accusing Hezbollah of essentially drawing the attacks, but also of the opening up of sectarian schisms within the state as a consequence of the displacement of Shia populations from the south into Sunni, Maronite, and Druze areas across Lebanon.
And I want to go back to a point you made earlier about the protection of Lebanese government and what roles people are playing in this current offensive. Is Hezbollah acting as an independent actor here, or is it now fully integrated into Iran's regional war strategy?
Well, I think that's the billion-dollar question. The extent to which Hezbollah has been integrated into the Lebanese state is one that has been discussed and debated ad infinitum for the past few decades. Similarly, with regard to Iran's war strategy, many have called Hezbollah a proxy of Iran. I don't think that quite captures the dynamics. I think it's a problematic way of looking at it. I think that Hezbollah is certainly an ally of Iran, a close ally. But Hezbollah has also got its own agenda. It's got its own interests, its own aspirations. It's fighting in some ways for Lebanese sovereignty rather than just fighting in support of the Islamic Republic, all the way in the east of the region. So I think there are a couple of different dynamics at play here. One is the territorial dynamics with regard to Israeli attacks on Lebanese sovereignty. And two, there is the ideological solidarity between Hezbollah and Iran. Of course, the two were co-constitutive. They helped, the Iranians helped establish Hezbollah back in the 1980s. But I think to reduce it merely to an Iranian proxy or an Iranian pawn in this broader geopolitical game misses a lot of the local dynamics of Hezbollah trying to fight to protect its southern borders of Lebanon, trying to protect the Shia communities who live there. And that makes it even more challenging with regard to the relationship with the Lebanese government, whom Hezbollah say has not done enough to actually curtail and to stop Israeli strikes on Lebanon.
And I think it's important to remind viewers that Beirut has banned Hezbollah's military activities and ordered the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps out, enforcing none of it. So are we watching Lebanon fail as a state in real time?
Well, again, that's something that has been discussed and debated for decades, ever since the killing of Rafik Hariri after the civil war, which opened up these deep fissures within Lebanon between the March 8 and March 14 camps that pitted essentially Sunni against Shia. And we've seen that debate over and over again, a frozen government, a frozen power-sharing government, seemingly an inept government that is unable to curtail the power of Hezbollah across Lebanon. And yes, Hezbollah's military wing has now been declared illegal by the Lebanese government, but it has been unable to do anything to stop that. And it must be said as well, Hezbollah has immediately refused and rejected that diktat from the Lebanese government in Beirut to say that it is not illegal. It is fighting this Israeli invasion into South Lebanon. And much like with the Iranian ambassador to Lebanon being ejected by the Lebanese state and then refusing to leave, I think it leaves the Lebanese state in a very difficult position. It's deeply impotent now. It's failed to disarm Hezbollah. It's failed to really enact on its declaration that the group is illegal. It's failed to get rid of the Iranian ambassador to the country. It's failed to force him to leave. And it's failed to protect its own sovereignty. So I think we are seeing a really dire situation facing the Lebanese state. And that's before we get onto the economic issues. That's before we get onto the social schisms that are starting to play out. The environmental catastrophe that has been exacerbated by the Israeli bombardment. There's a whole host of different issues at play here. And the Lebanese government in Beirut seems incapable of actually addressing these things.
So can this armed group, can Hezbollah sustain a prolonged war of attrition given the scale of strikes on its infrastructure since 2024?
We just don't know, is the short answer. We don't know what its arsenal is like. We don't know how much of its weaponry was destroyed back in 2023, 2024, how much it has left now. We know that its command and control functions were badly damaged, if not completely destroyed, with the pager attacks of the summer of 2024. We know that the killing of Hassan Nasrallah was a real blow, a body blow to the Party of God, to Hezbollah. But we don't know how much resilience it has. We don't know how much of its arsenal remains. We know that it tried to get a lot of its weapons out into the Bekaa Valley. We don't know how much it managed to do that during the last official phase of conflict, if you want to call it that, back in 23-24. We don't know how much it's been able to regroup since then. We don't know how much it's been able to learn from the conflict of 23-24. So there's a lot that we just don't know. But what we are seeing, and if we look purely at the facts on the ground, there have been some very strong strikes on Israel coming from South Lebanon that tells us that Hezbollah at present is able to continue the fighting.
And lastly, the US says it wants the war in Iran to wind down within weeks. Will a deal with Iran automatically close the Lebanon front, or does this conflict now have its own momentum?
I think it has its own momentum. We saw that back in 2023, going into 2024. We saw that the Hezbollah has its own issues pertaining to what is happening in Lebanon. It has its own grievances with Israel. It has its own reasons for conflict. And again, this goes back to the point I was making earlier. It is not merely an Iranian stooge. It is not just an Iranian proxy. If it was, then I think a deal between the US, Israel, and Iran would bring about an end to this front. But I think that given that there has been this opening up of a new front, given that there has been this cultivation and generation of new grievances, of new anger, mass displacement across Lebanon, the sense that Hezbollah would just forget all about that, park all of that because Iran has made peace, I think is a misreading of the situation. And that makes the whole region even more complex, even more fluid, and even more precarious right now.
And Simon, any final thoughts? We just heard evacuation warnings for the coastal city of Tyre, a city rich with cultural history. What could we potentially see happen next?
Well, if we look at the pattern of what's happened, evacuation orders have been followed by targeting, bombing campaigns, contributing to the mass displacement of peoples and contributing to the destruction of heritage sites. We've seen that in Lebanon, of course, and we've seen that in Iran recently. Whether they have been deliberately targeted or not, it's difficult to say, but the destruction of heritage sites contributes to the destruction and the attacks on a particular identity, a national identity. And that is something that is deeply abhorrent as well, alongside the mass displacement of people. And Tyre is a large city in the grand scheme of Lebanese politics. Not as big as Beirut, of course, but still a large city. And that will lead to more and more displacement, which will exacerbate the problems that Lebanon is facing from the war with Israel now, that failing to recover from the war that happened in 23-24, the ongoing strikes, the legacy of the COVID-19 pandemic, the socioeconomic devastation that the country has faced. It is a really dark time for Lebanon, and I fear for the people who are living there right now.
Simon Mabon, it's been really interesting talking to you. Thank you for your time. Simon Mabon there, Professor of International Politics and Middle East Studies at Lancaster University. Thank you again for your time.